The heart of this robot vacuum, the new Eufy E20, can be removed whilst it's still beating and then used as a handheld vacuum when a human touch is needed, and then afterwards you can surgically place it back into its chest and it will continue to lurch on to clean another day like some abominable STU'S monster. Except far more elegant, far more efficient than anything I could have expected. But it's absolutely mental design. Now, I said only a short while ago that we're at the peak of experimentation for robot vacuums, where every manufacturer is trying something new and exciting to see what sticks. And Eufy have rather proved my point with this one. It's a super unique approach to giving you both a robot and a handheld in a single unit. We've seen from the past from manufacturers like Ecovacs and SwitchBot, where there's a handheld vacuum as an additional accessory that slots into the base station, but we've never seen anything like this, to my knowledge, where the robot actually uses the main body of a handheld to power it. Now, the handle part of the handheld, which contains the engineering for the suction power, is neatly slotted in the top, and to remove it, all you do is press the large red button and pull it out. Now, this has the obvious benefit of making the entire package much smaller than robot stations with combos and the additional handheld slotted into it, but I was concerned that this might end up being more of a faff than the alternative. But it's actually quite easy to transform it into a handheld. This is my robot. There are many robots, but this robot is mine. Sure, it's a little slower than just pulling one out of a base station, but I have a point here in that the handheld for me is a rare use thing. I have a Dyson V15 that I've been using and the Eufy S1 Pro to accompany it around the house for the past couple of months. And the Dyson maybe gets pulled out of the cupboard once a month at most to do a very quick spot clean or get into some deep corners. Point being, by having a great big vacuum latched onto what is otherwise a small base station would be a waste of space. This method that the Eufy E20 uses means that I can save space whilst ensuring I have the functionality of a handheld when those rare occurrences do happen. Thing is, it's not just a main brush vacuum attachment that it can join to. It's also capable of joining to a small nozzle, which is ideal for cleaning small spaces like cars, making it particularly adaptable. And even more so when you realise the nozzle can be extracted or protruded if you want to use the brush segment rather than the hard plastic point. And there's even a finer option as well, hidden in the front of the vacuum right here. The thing I find fantastic about it all is that as a handheld, it performs amazingly well. You can almost forget that you're using the heart of a robot vacuum for your floors. I mean, it even powers the brush at the bottom of the main attachment, which can even extend, although it is a little bit short for my 6'8" stature. So it would have been nice if it was a bit longer. But that's a me problem. There aren't many people my height. But putting that to one side, if I just handed the entire handheld section to you, you'd have absolutely no clue that it's anything other than a handheld vacuum, which I think is a real accolade for this device. Often devices that try to do too much or too many different things are only mediocre or adequate rather than exemplary. You know the saying, a jack of all trades is a master of none. Well, it would appear that the E20 might not have learnt that saying, because one of the reasons it performs so well as a handheld is that Eufy have managed to squeeze an absolutely unholy level of suction out of it. This thing is capable of 30,000 pascals of suction, which is over 3 times the power of regular robot vacuum cleaners. Just watch this. This is an insane level of suction that dwarfs even devices like the S1 Pro, which is the pinnacle of Eufy's cleaning technology, but there's a bit of an asterisk here, and this is slightly unusual, but probably an unusual but that ultimately has a reason beyond my understanding. When you place the heart back into the robot, it doesn't actually use all 30,000 pascals of suction. Instead, it reduces it to 8,000, which is more in keeping with other robots in the Eufy range. Now, I assume this might be something to do with the battery life. After all, the robot is being powered by the battery included in the handheld section, and running it at maximum suction lowers the battery life considerably. If the robot also has to power its navigation systems, its wheels, its brush, and everything else it needs, then it would very likely run out of battery before it even finishes a room. It may also be because of the nature of the design too. Ultimately, you have less power in a robot vacuum because the suction section doesn't actually seal to the floor as much as a normal vacuum cleaner does. So that potentially has an impact on the suction rating too. Without a doubt, it is a bit of a shame they couldn't draw slightly more power out of the vacuum mechanism, especially considering that the hardware is there. Perhaps they could do maybe a software update to allow a bit more power. But that aside, it's still super impressive that you're able to get 30,000 pascals from the handheld section when you need it for spot cleaning. Now, there's one other point to make about the suction and large handheld section, in that it ends up being a bit of a trade-off. Because the suction system is bigger, it means that there's no mopping system on this robot. It's purely just vacuum, which in itself is a rare thing to see. Most manufacturers are trying to churn out mopping and vacuuming solutions left, right and centre. But I've always said I'd like to see more models with vacuum-only function, and this is exactly why. Without all the extra tech and goings needed for mopping functionality, there's room to create a far more efficient, capable and interesting vacuum functionality, which is ideal for people who perhaps have more carpet in their house than hard flooring, something which in the UK anyway tends to be a more common aesthetic. In most homes, only the kitchen or maybe bathroom is a hard floor, so with other robots you're sacrificing far better suction and vacuuming function for a mop that's only used in a couple of small rooms at best. I get that it's going to be very dependent on your own floor, but I'll say hands down that if you have majority of carpets, the E20 is already looking like a bit of a winner. But going back to the suction, there's a few other additional innovations in this that make it a great vacuum device, and one of those is Eufy's new anti-tangle comb system, which we saw very recently on the C20 and X10. This sits on the inside of the main robot brush, and it flicks out to cut any hair that gets tangled around a rotating brush. And I'll say now that it makes a massive difference to the overall experience and nearly eliminates the amount of times that you'll get the scissors out to cut all the hair off the brush. If you never had to do this, it's obvious you don't live with females or a very large hairy dog. But it's nice to see them incorporating this into yet another new model. It's very likely that this will potentially filter into every model in future. Fingers crossed. S2 Pro. Now, another cool design choice is the new Aero Turbo TM filtration system used on the vacuum, which is a 5-stage filtration system designed to mitigate reduction in efficiency whilst also providing a stronger level of filtration for the air that passes through it. It's hard to say for certain how useful this is, but so far, after a few weeks of use, I haven't actually noticed a drop in efficiency. But only time and repeated use will actually show how well this system performs. But other than those physical innovations, we've also seen a bit of an overhaul to the AI too, which is complemented by the fact that they've chosen to keep both the nav hat on the top and the sensors on the front and sides. From use, I'd say this particular model seems very good at obstacle avoidance, often coming as close as just a few millimeters away from an object without hardly touching it. So to test this, I placed a handful of cups of water on the floor to see if it would knock any over or not. Lo and behold, it was so gentle that not a drop was spilt. Despite getting close up and personal with the cups, it was rather impressive. I think it really shows the advancements that Eufy have made to the overall AI and navigation of the robots. Now, the robot isn't the only thing that's worth discussing, because there's also a base station too, as mentioned. Because of its focus only on vacuuming, the station is a lot smaller than models that feature combo cleaning, which is good. It will certainly suit people. it just ends up being far less conspicuous. It can charge the robot from 0 to full in just 2.5 hours, and by the nature of design, this means the handheld will charge that quick, and it also features a 3.5 litre collection bag too, which gives enough space for a few months of use without having to change it. What was quite fun was that the way it works when it empties itself is it backs up to it, empties the handheld, goes out, turns around, goes in forward to charge itself, which I thought was quite cool. And another detail is that if you've used a handheld and put it in the actual charging bay here, whilst this is in the station, if you've used a handheld for more than 10 minutes, it will then reverse out, reverse back into the base station, empty the handheld, and then turn back around and charge itself again. And I thought that was quite a neat addition to make sure that your handheld and robot are always fully charged. But overall, nothing super special. It's still well designed and well built. But there is one thing I felt that was slightly missing from the base station. Now, I get that Eufy have purposefully moved away from the conventional idea of a full-on handheld vacuum latched onto a base station. They've also removed, with it, any natural storage for the handheld's accessories. Now, the robot obviously has this in it, which is fine, but that leaves two other things floating about. Because there's no natural place to store these, you're going to have to find some dark corner or cupboard to stuff them until they get used again, which, as I mentioned earlier, may be some time in between uses. So no doubt you'll probably forget which safe place you've put the attachments, just like I have. They do have a wall-mounted rack, which you can get as an additional extra to store the accessories, although if you pre-order it, they're giving you one of these for free, so that's at least a solution. You just potentially have to pay for that if you're watching this after the pre-orders have ended. And talking about payment, let's move on to the cost. Now, I've been very lucky to get hold of this prior to release, and I believe at the time that I'm writing this is that if you pre-order it, you might get a slight discount. But watching this after release, the RRP comes to £549, which I think is pretty reasonable. I mean, let's face it, you're getting two devices in one, a handheld vacuum and a robot. And if you bought both individually and wanted performance at the same level as the E20, you'd end up paying probably quite a bit more. So you can't really say fairer than that. And I really love this take on a robot vacuum for that very reason. It perhaps isn't the most versatile robot. It ultimately has quite a high profile, so it might not be able to go under certain low furniture, which devices like the S1 Pro can get under because it's missing the nav hat. And as well, it might be missing a few of the up-to-date innovations that we've seen recently from other devices, such as an extendable side brush or legs to help it climb steps. And yes, I'd have loved it if they'd been able to squeeze a little bit more suction from the robot, considering the large vacuum mechanism. But even still, this performs excellently, and one thing you can't say about it is that it isn't unique. It's certainly a very interesting take on robot vacuum cleaners, and it saves a ton of space and in theory money if you account for the two products in one, whilst also performing as well as a robot as it does a handheld. So really, it's hard for me not to want to give this a really big pat on its back for being such a fun, interesting, and most of all, useful little device. But what do you guys think? Do you think that its transforming design and focus on vacuuming makes this a perfect robot for people with carpets? Or is the whole Transformers experience just a bit of a gimmick that will be forgotten to the annals of history? Let us know in the comments below so we can all have a good chinwag over it. And if today's episode helped you make up your mind on the brand new Eufy E20 robot vacuum cleaner, then make sure you hit that thumbs up and subscribe button to see more. And I'll see you all back for another episode of STU'S Reviews soon.